Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the next Foreman community demo. September already. Where is the time going? I think it's a factor of I'm getting old, right? And it's like, yeah, time seems to go much quicker at the moment. And I'm like, how can we possibly be in December? Or, December? You see, I'm already forecasting. We're not even in December yet. We're in September. Let's not go there. We've got a busy show today, so I'm going to kick right off. The usual caveats and announcements. Check your YouTube quality settings in case it's defaulted to something terrible and you can't read any of the text. If you want to come and talk to us, you can use YouTube live chat or you can use our IRC channel. Do note that Freenode is under huge amounts of spam still at the moment, and so our channels require you to be authenticated to Freenode in order to speak. Or if you're using Matrix, that works as well, because Matrix has an exception. So you can come talk with us in either of those places. The agenda today, 1.19 is out. I'll talk about that in a minute, and Catella 3.8 as well. So congrats to the release teams on both sides there for another round of smooth releases. We've got stuff about content. We've got stuff about Ansible. We've got stuff about HTTP boot, which I'm quite excited about. We've got a few other bits and pieces for you as well. I'm going to talk about a new project of my own at the end if we have time. So lots to cover today. So 1.19, just quickly cover that. So that was out, I think, about a week ago. We've got support for Ubuntu Bionic in there. There's new widgets for the dashboard. You can log all of Foreman's logs to syslog now, which I think is quite nice. There is a way to report builds that are failing, which is also very nice. And you can pick that up in the appropriate forum topics, or I couldn't get the full URL in there. It doesn't fit. But 1.19 has been released in the release announcements category. You can get all of the release notes, upgrade paths, etc. there. Do check it out. You'll also find the notes for Catella 3.8 there as well. So go and have a look and prep your upgrade engines. Tell us all about what's happening. Upcoming events, I do try and keep this in here now. So we've got quite a lot going on October now. So there's the Open Source Automation Day in Munich, which I believe we'll have a speaker at. So if, that's hosted by our good friends at Natix, and they're also deciding to do a Foreman Hack Day after that. So if you're heading, make sure you get 2 nights and come along and do some coding or you know, whatever you're interested in, documentation, triage, etc. There'll be plenty going on. And then there's Open Source Summit EU Edinburgh, which I've talked about before. I've got a couple of talks there, and there's going to be a pretty large Red Hat presence in general. So you'll generally be able to find me and a bunch of other Red Hatters at the Red Hat desk when we're not actually giving talks. So come along and chat with us if you're going to be in Edinburgh. Okay, and one last thing I want to mention. I promised Homer that I'd do this. He posted a topic about whether we should be more opinionated about our use of organizations and locations, which if you don't use that feature in Foreman, it has to be enabled at the command line because it changes a lot of things. We are considering whether or not we should just make these the default and remove that switch because it would simplify a lot of the internal code. So if you have thoughts on that, please do visit the appropriate topic and tell us what you think, because I think there's value in us being more opinionated, but it really only works if we're opinionated in the right way. So come and tell us what you think. Okay, enough from me for now. I'm going to move on to our presenters, and we'll start with Chris Dury, who is going to give us package searches. What you got for us, Chris?
Hey everyone. So I just went into the demo. This is a pretty quick demo, but basically in the past, I believe it's been in Nightly for a little bit. I don't know about other versions, but the package search wasn't working. So if you put like duck here, previously it would raise, or duck. Yeah, previously it would raise a 500 error, but now it returns the results. One of the other kind of interesting things, so I did not work on this particular on the next fix I'm going to demo, but one of the cool things is now you can put UVR equals and search for the name and version, put like 06.1, and it'll also come up with all of the RPMs that have 0.061 in them. Because the scope search team did work to support virtual fields, so there's no EVR field in the database, but if you write it in your model object, it will now work. So that's actually it. So pretty short demo. Thanks everyone.
Cool, very smooth, very quick. Caught me on the hop there, but that's fine. Thanks very much. Obviously, that probably hasn't even made it to YouTube yet, so hang around and we'll see if there's any questions. They're usually delayed by about 30 seconds to a minute. So. You know. Oh, okay. Yeah, there's a stream delay. So right, okay. So let's move on, and we'll come back to you if there's any questions for that. So Stephen, UFEI UEFI, yes, HTTP boot. This has been in the works for a while, right?
Yep. So lots of acronyms there, hard to say. So this feature was added by Lukash to Foreman and the Smart Proxy, and I helped get everything tested. So typically, over DHCP, you're going to get a next server and a file name, which you're going to download over TFTP. But if you're using UEFI, you have another option, which is HTTP boot. So this was relatively recently introduced in version 2.5. So your hardware may or may not support it, depending on what firmware you're running. But it really opens up provisioning to be faster and more secure, especially when you incorporate things like secure boot and HTTPS. So a few caveats. It's still rough around the edges. Almost immediately, we found a bug in the UEFI firmware for libvirt, but it's been fixed. So the team was super responsive. It was fixed within like less than a couple weeks. We also found a bug in Grub 2. So we needed to get a patch in that. That will ship in Fedora 29 and eventually in a CentOS release. So anyway, let's move on with the demo. So there's two new components to UEFI HTTP boot. The first is a new smart proxy feature called HTTP boot. This basically just shares your var-lib tftp boot directory, which has your kernels, init, grub config over HTTP and HTTPS. And then there's the Foreman side of things. So in Foreman, when you create a host, this is my dev environment, so it's a little bit slow. But when you go to create a host, you're going to have a new option to select a different PXE loader, which will be for HTTP or HTTPS. So I have a host group set up for this already. If you switch to the operating system tab, you're going to see this new PXE loader for Grub 2 UEFI HTTP. So there's a little warning here. This is still experimental, but if you've got the firmware that can use it, do give it a try. There's some other options, HTTPS and HTTPS secure boot. Today we're going to do HTTPS. I can't demonstrate secure boot since I've compiled the Grub 2 images myself. They're not signed, but we can do HTTPS. So depending on your firmware, you might get a CA bundle shipped with it that the firmware trusts. Otherwise, you might have to enroll a CA into UEFI. You can do that in the boot menu. Maybe Redfish supports it, I don't know. For libvirt, I actually made a floppy disk and mounted it to the image. I won't show you that, but if you want to test that out and need help getting that working, I can help with that. But anyway, set the PXE loader the way you want it. I'm going to add the MAC address for this VM. And .ip. Okay. That should be good. Submit. Great. So in libvirt, I'm going to show you the VM that I've got. When you want to create a VM that uses UEFI, you basically go through the wizard and you see this customize configuration before install checkbox. You click it, and then you'll be able to change this firmware option to use OVMF, which is the UEFI firmware you can use with QEMU. So I've already got this VM set up. Let me show you. So it's going to boot, and instead of doing PXE TFTP, you're going to see UEFI say it's going to do an HTTP boot. The way that this works actually is in DHCP. Oh, this is great. It's not working. So the way that this works in the DHCP config, create an entry for it. So you'll see the next server file name is set to be a URL. Did I change? If this had worked, the grub menu would load. Problem with live demos. I did this morning and it did work. Try this again. Yeah, so I'm not sure what happened the first time, but it did load the grub 2 menu over HTTP. And when I boot the Kickstart, what you'll see is in this, probably too small to read, but in the smart proxy background, this is all being done over HTTPS. So it's grabbing the kernel and init.rd over HTTPS, and in a few seconds we should see Linux start to boot. And then eventually it'll launch into Anaconda and do the Kickstart. So any second now, hopefully we'll see the kernel messages start appearing. There we go. So if we wait, it'll load up Anaconda and do the install. But like I said, it's still rough around the edges. Things still need to get polished. But if you get the hardware firmware that can do HTTP boot, definitely check it out. It's pretty cool. That's it. Thanks.
Super. Chris is already asking in chat, how does it know what are the root CAs? How does it know what to trust?
Yeah, so basically that's what I was saying. If you've got firmware, it's totally up to the hardware firmware that you're running. So if you're using OVMF compiled with UFEI support, then basically there's a menu option to enroll a trusted CA. And the way that I did that in libvirt is actually, my VM's out of memory. The way that I actually did this is I created a floppy disk, that image that had a CA on it, and then I attached it to the VM. I'm sure your firmware probably has better ways to do that, maybe through something like Redfish, but it's entirely dependent on your hardware vendor. And if you can't get HTTPS to work, you can use just plain HTTP.
Cool. Sounds good. How does that play with like getting things signed? Like if you're modifying, is the CA like a sideload thing that isn't part of the sign?
Yeah, it's something you have to do in advance, right? So you would have to load the CA into your firmware to be trusted. I mean, I would hope that maybe if you're using commercial certs and your hardware vendor is shipping a CA bundle with it, then it would just work, for example. But if you're using something like Foreman where the certs are self-signed, then yeah, you've got to load it in there somehow. Ostensibly, there's this grand unified thing called Redfish that should be able to configure your firmware for you. I don't know if it's got CA enrollment features, but I would imagine it should. But yeah, this is definitely something that needs to still get sorted out, I think.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's all pretty early. Cool. Okay. Thanks very much, Stephen.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. So moving on, Chris Roberts. Let's do some Hammer, shall we? Other Chris.
Yep. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. So previously with Hammer and provisioning on compute resources around VMware, you need to know the cluster ID. And so the only way to really get that is either in VMware itself or through the web UI or looking in the database. So the one thing I've added here is actually now the ability to get that cluster information so you can pass it along. So I've configured a compute resource. I'm just going to do it through Hammer shell so it's interactive. We have a compute resource. So what I can do now is I can actually go ahead and get we have a new feature called clusters. And if we look at what we can do, we can either pass it, the default information, organization ID, and so forth. So I'm going to pass it just the ID. Now we can actually get clusters. So now we can actually know what to pass to Foreman to automate provisioning with Hammer. So that was one of the things I wanted to demo as far as Foreman side, as far as adding that ability now. Let me get out of that. The next thing I wanted to demo was it's something that Ivan wrote, and it may be good for users of Foreman, but I know a lot of devs use it, and we stopped using it because of the it not working with the installer anymore. So right now I have the Git repo clone, and this is the old way. So I've made a cert, and I'm going to show you how it used to work and then how it works now. So let's see. So right now I've used it the old way, and it would fail with Catella search check. So the installer would not like that. And so what I've done is I went ahead and fixed, submitted a PR, and it's merged to the repo. Now that allows it to work with the installer, and it basically will give you the subject alt name and the digital signature key usage. So let me go to the new repo. And I'm going to go ahead and basically I'll show you how it works real quick. You just generate a cert or a CA, put a password, and you just next through this. And so now I've got a CA. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and make a cert for myself. And what you do is you pass it in whatever host name you want to make. And we pass in our password, and we're going to just sign it. Yes. So now we have a folder exactly with that. So what I'm going to do now is call Catella search check. And now we have everything fixed, and now we can use these certs with a with the installer. So customers may like to try it out and test certs, and the devs and everybody now who is developing with Foreman can now use certs again with the easy CA process. And that's all I had.
Awesome, much smoother, very, very nice indeed. I don't see any questions for you on that one, so I guess we'll move on. So up next, we're going to talk about Ansible variables. Daniel, you there?
Yeah.
Here he is.
All right, let me share the screen. Okay. Is it working?
There's usually a delay. Let's see. Not seeing it yet.
Oh, okay. Now?
Nope. Are you on Wayland?
Yes, I am, but
right.
Let me just try.
I'll move on to John while you play around with your screen sharing. Oh wait, no, there you are. We got it. We got it. Just as I move the slide on. Okay, cool. Off you go.
Awesome. All right. So Ansible variables is a feature that got merged into Foreman Ansible last week. Thanks, Sebastian, for the review. It hasn't been released yet, although I think Mark is planning a release soon for this. So I'm going to demo this from develop, although it should be shortly available in nightly. First of all, let me show you what Ansible variables look like. Normally, when you have Ansible roles, like in this case, here I have this bunch of Ansible roles. I can click on this one. Oh, maybe it's too dark, right? To see. Maybe now it's easier. Okay, so I'm in this directory. We have this role, and this role has a set of playbooks, and in here we have main.yaml. So in main.yaml, we can see that variables are referenced this way using this curly bracket syntax, and what's inside of that is the Ansible variable. So what this feature is doing is wherever you have a Foreman proxy with the Ansible feature, it's parsing your roles and looking for this so that you can import these variables and use them just like you use Puppet class smart class parameters. So just as you use Puppet class variables. Okay, let me go back to the UI so you can see how this works. So now when you go to configure here, you will see this variables button here. If you go to the roles page, and you will be able to see that for each of the for each of the roles you have in here, you have a variables button in here. If I click on it, I hope this, yeah, it has some, at least one variable. So, okay, you have access to all of your variables like that. However, you want to see a more global view, you can just go to configure, then variables, and here you can, well, order them by role, by name, and so forth. How to import them, because when you migrate to a version of the plugin that has this feature, they won't be imported automatically. It's just like importing Puppet. It's just like importing Puppet variables. You just go to click on import, then you choose the proxy you want to import them from. And here you have the name of the variables that have not been imported yet. If you had some obsolete variables, they would show up here. In this case, we only have new variables for all of these roles. So let's just import this one just so we can see it shows up. Ansible package manager. All right. So it's here. So I made a little demo. Let me go to the same role I was showing here, the Apple role. It has the GPG key file. So GPG key file. Sorry, there was some, yeah. GPG key file. If we click on it, it will be the same as any Puppet class, smart class parameter. We have the validators here. If you're familiar with how this works in Puppet, it's the same. We should be updating the Foreman Ansible documentation to include some references about how this works. We can choose the type of the variable, so this would be useful for people who want to send things like anything other than strings cannot be sent as variables in the Foreman inventory. Well, now you can just import your variables and assign whatever type you want here. Before, it was only possible to use strings. So I created a matcher here for host group test BZ. The value is my test file, so I have a file that will be deployed to this destination. All right, so I have assigned that to a host. Let me go to that host. Where is it? Well, okay, just for the sake of making it faster, let's go through. Well, I've already run it a minute before, so if you go to the host and click on Run Ansible Roles, in case you're not familiar with this, it's this button right here. You click on it, and then a job will start running. This job will put those variables in the inventory. We click on the output here, so we can see what happened, and we can see that the role was used. All right. So what else? Just in case you don't know how to apply roles, it's simply editing the host for this. Okay. So before doing this, I clicked on edit the host, then on the Ansible roles page, and then I selected the Apple one. And if we go to that directory, etc pki rpm gpg, there should be, yeah, it's right here, my test file. So so that's what it does basically. Last thing, not sure why I have two of these, probably because I was developing this and okay, because yeah, when I was developing this, I renamed the setting and now I have two. You shouldn't have two when you update. This thing, top level Ansible variables, it is important. Let's say you didn't want to use the variables the way you didn't want to use the names of the variables just as they are in here. So, for example, in this one, you have git enable repo, or maybe you want to get that from a bigger, from a bigger hash that is prefixed like this, Foreman params. Actually this. In case you don't want to use the variables directly, you can also use the params hash to indicate that the variable is coming from Foreman. This could be useful in case you want to be explicit about it. And I think this is all I have. Yeah, that's it.
Super. Very, very nice. I'm just gonna have a look around. I don't see any questions just now. Seems like pretty straightforward, but very, very valuable addition for sure. Brings a lot of parity with some of the other ways we can do configuration management, right? So like to see that. That's really, really good. So okay, hang around. We'll see if there's any questions. In the meantime, next up, it's John. Let's talk about modularity.
All right. Thanks, Greg. My name is John Mitch. I'm on the Catella team, and I am my IRC nick is Joe Mitch. So I'm going to talk about modularity and modularity streams. This is something that was introduced in Fedora 28. When you sync a repository, you can now get modules, you can get streams, you can get profiles, and this is all a way to manage different versions of different packages and ensure that you can use, the leading cutting edge of a certain package and a more stable version of a different package. So there's a lot of documentation about that on Fedora wiki and the Fedora docs. So I'm not going to go too into that, but instead I'm going to show how we integrated this into Catella. So here I have a synced repo. This is just an example repo, zoo, and I have synced it, and you can see that there are module streams now showing. So we now store these in our database. And that is a link that goes to a top level page, which I will show in a little bit. And if you go to the repository details, you can see there's another count of module streams with another link. So that's just added into this content type table here. And for content views, you can add and remove these repositories, and you're going to see more counts of these module streams. And when you publish a new version, actually, I think I have it open here. Yep. When you publish a new version, the module streams are going to be in that version. Currently, the current state of things is that they are just copied over blindly, not regarding filters, but we are working to figure out how to incorporate content view filters into this to filter out module streams. And this is all in our API. So we have a bunch of different endpoints, pretty much the typical endpoints you would see for module stream or for content types here. And if I click on one, you can see there's a bunch of different parameters you can pass in. So you can pass in organization, repository, environment, content view, version, and that kind of thing to get the module streams you want. So here we have the top level page for module streams. And this is actually something that is still in a PR, but it's very close to being merged. So I think it's safe to demo this. But you get to it by going to this content dropdown and down here to module streams. And this is all searchable. There's quite a few different fields you can search on. So, and you'll get that. So this is going to show the name, version, stream, context, and arch for a module stream. And those are the fields that actually make a module stream unique. So you can have duplicate names as you see here, or duplicate streams, or that kind of thing. So now I'm going to show, this is another PR, but I'm going to show Hammer. And let me just switch my screen real quick. So this again is still in a PR, but it's pretty close to being merged. So I'm going to go ahead and demo it. But you can list with Hammer your module streams for an organization, and it takes a bunch of different parameters. All the ones you saw in the API. And it's also not restrained to organizations. So you can list a whole bunch of module streams for that are on your system. And you can show the module stream info for a module stream here, and you can see the repositories that it's linked to, the artifacts, which basically means the RPMs that are in the module stream or that it handles, and the profiles, and then the different RPMs that are in those profiles when you enable those profiles. And that, I believe, is it.
Super. Fantastic. Okay. Again, not really seeing any questions there. It's quiet today. So we will move on. So next, it is going to be Aditi, who's going to talk to us about some more Hammer stuff.
Hi everyone, hope I'm audible.
Yep, you're fine.
Thank you. So today this is my first demo. So hello everyone, and also I would like to explain a little bit about the feature that I've added. So up until now, we were able to provide the proxy IDs to the subnet in Hammer. For creation of subnets or updating the subnets, but with this feature I have added the ability to provide the proxy name. So let me go ahead and demo it for you.
You might want to make your font just a little bit bigger if you can.
Microphone?
Yeah, just if you could just make the text a little bit bigger, just because because the YouTube streams can be quite low quality, so it'll be difficult to read at that size. Yeah, that'd be great.
Right?
That's great. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and list the subnets first. So currently I have few subnets created with me. So I've copied the commands just to be quick. So if I create a subnet, this is the original, or I should say the earlier format. So using the TFTP ID or DNS ID, so any proxy features that are enabled for me, I'm able to create a subnet in this way. So if I see the info, I have these three proxies with me. So what I have done recently, I'll just clear this. If I want to create a subnet, instead of providing the IDs, I'll directly give the name. There it is. Shows subnet created. We'll check for ID 11 because the last one created was 10. And it gave the same result for us. So this is, I'll show you the proxy ID 1 that I had used earlier. So maybe Hammer proxy list. This is the ID, that is 1, which is getting matched with the name. And similarly, what I have done is for update. So I have, let's say, sorry. I have subnet with ID 9, let's say, already existing, which has no entries as of now. So I just want to update this with this command, that is updating the ID9 with the names of smart proxies. And it gives me updated, and now I want to see the info, and it shows updations. So I guess it's a small demo, but that is all I have right now. So thank you.
Oh, that's great. I'm all in favor of making Hammer more friendly wherever possible. So it's nice to see that continuing. So thank you very much. So we'll move on from there. So I think finally, Andrew, let's talk about Y streams.
Thanks, Greg. I'm Andrew Kofink, a Kofink on the Foreman Dev if you want to reach out to me about this. So this is a page in Kitello for enabling Red Hat repositories. And we have had a lot of bug reports around this page just because it can be confusing sometimes. One of the things is, if we look right here, you have these, 6 server version or the 6.10, 6.2, whatever. So these are what we're talking about when we say Y stream version. It's a x.y version. So as you can see now on this page, we're recommending not to enable this. You can still enable it, of course. The page works identically as it did before, but now there's this info tooltip that just says that we're not suggesting this repository, and there's some documentation that's linked. And so there's an article here that explains the content delivery time period for these Y stream repos. And generally, we don't want users, generally users should not be using these repositories. And so when people, enable them, that's when we get a report that says something like, we're not getting updates for some reason. So that's basically the feature. One thing to note is that this does not apply to Kickstart repositories. So just to show you, these are all Y streams. They're Kickstart. It makes sense to enable Y streams for Kickstarts. There are no, X version for Kickstart, obviously. And yeah, that's basically it. So
Nice
thanks, Greg.
Nice and quick. Yeah, no problem. But it makes a lot of sense, right? So, anytime you can lower your support burden, that's a good idea. Okay, cool. Well, that does leave me a little bit of time to talk about something I'm working on. So, so this is very much an alpha of something I've been playing around with. So let me just bring this over here, and we'll see if we can get it to show up. So let's see if we can get it to work. So basically, well, let me talk through what I'm going to show you. One of my focuses for the last wee while has been on statistics and metrics to try and get a better view of the Foreman community, to try and help us understand where we can improve and what we're doing right and what we're not doing right. And I've been studying a lot on how to do this nicely over the last few months, and it's starting to come together into something I can actually package up for people now. So what I've put together is a web app. You can find it at stats.theforeman.org. And basically, there's 3 graphs that are live right now. They're all based on Redmine. There are GitHub ones coming. I'm working on a bunch of things like time to merge and for all our various repos at the moment, but I've not got that into a usable state for everyone else to consume yet. But for now, we've got some Redmine data, so I'll walk you through a little bit of what you're seeing here. I'll start with probably the least interesting graph for most people. This is a demographics graph. This is useful to me as the community lead because it tells me something about the distribution of our users and what they the sort of length of time that they've been in. The people who have been active in the community recently, how long have they been part of the community? So it tells me that the sort of median age of our recent contributors is about a year. So that's quite. I'm not sure it's a useful piece of information by itself, but you track that over time, and that could be an interesting trend to watch, right? So that's not very useful for anybody else, but I thought I'd mention it. You can see there's some outliers, right? OHAD, right down here. Then we've got the category graphs. So this is open and triaged bugs. So all of this maps open bugs. You don't see closed bugs here. And it's open bugs by by triage state, basically. And what I really like about this graph is it shows you really interestingly who has good process, right? So if I just enable all the categories for Foreman, it's a fairly busy graph, and you can see we're not particularly good with uncategorized. But if I switch this to Catella, right? So basically this here represents projects within Redmine, so you can pick any Redmine project you like. But if I pick Catello, they're really good at triage, right? The whole graph flips around in color. I'd love to see a graph more like this for the rest of the Foreman projects. It'd be really nice to know we're actually looking at our bugs occasionally. Also note that because you do triage process, your numbers are in the region of like 150, whereas if I go back to Foreman, then that's very much not the case, right? 400 plus. Still, it's useful, and because there's a lot of categories and it might be interesting to only look at certain categories, you can also sort of, as I said, start with all the compute resources shown, so you can do that as well, and you can have a look at your compute resources. So I can see Chris Roberts here having an effect with those Catello processes. The VMware bugs are getting triaged. That's quite nice. So that's interesting. That's probably the most useful one to other people, certainly to project leads. And then finally, this is more of a sort of vanity graph more than anything. So this is open, closed, and net bugs. So the graph on the left is cumulative; that will never decrease, but it shows you the bugs over time and how they've risen. So you can look at various different slopes there. And then here on the right, we have the net, so that obviously can decrease if we're closing faster than we're opening. What's more interesting is that there's a set of linear models that fit to that tell you the sort of average rate of growth. So for what we're seeing here, this is all projects over a certain time window, then we're getting about 6 bugs a day closed and 8 bugs a day opened, right? So that's a net of 1.7 bugs per day increase. But you can change the time range, so we can go all the way back to like the start of the project. So I can do something like this, and there you go. And for those of us who've been in the community that long, you'll know exactly what date that this shift happened, right? This is 2014, was roughly when Catello joined us. So this is all your fault. No, it's not. Obviously, it's just more projects and more bugs, but that's just how it goes. But it's interesting to see that step change represented in the data. And you can also interact with the graph. So I can pick this slightly flatter area here, and you can see that the linear models are updating. So actually, that one seems to be stuck. Is that actually working? Oh yeah, there we go. So a steeper area goes up to 2.5. So this is really just a toy. It was me playing around with interactivity and linking like interactive graphs linked to a table and things like this. So we'll get much more interesting interactive data later. But nonetheless, there it is. And you can go and have a play with it. It's live. Do give it a moment when you load the page. It takes a little while to initialize all the data. But once it's up and running, it's reasonably snappy. Likewise, you can filter this by projects. So, for example, if I look at, say, Discovery, you get something that's a little bit more choppy. Someone did some triage here, right? Look at that. So, yeah, useful graphs, maybe not. It's a start. There's going to be a lot more of this kind of thing coming over the next few months as I get a better handle on what it is that's useful to us. So I'm going to start putting up graphs for people to have a look at, and then we can decide whether that tells us something useful or whether we need to look at things a different way, and then we can change those graphs. All the code's on GitHub, so stats dashboard on our GitHub organization if you want to contribute. Fair warning, it's written in R and it's really messy right now, so here be dragons. But if you know R and you want to help out, then please do because I could use it. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that. If you have any ideas as to graphs you would like to see, or changes to existing graphs, or if you find bugs or any of things like that, then there is a Redmine project, so you can go and log bugs against this project, and that will give me some place to track like what people have requested in terms of changes or new graphs. So log all your suggestions there, or just come talk to me on IRC and we can have a chat about what might make sense. Cool. Okay, so let me switch back to the slide deck just to finish us off. There we go. Right, so that's the end of today's demo. Thanks to all the presenters as always. I hope you've enjoyed it, and follow us in the usual places. I'm not going to bore you, but in the meantime, thanks for watching. Do take care.